Good morning. If we could please take our seats, we'd like to get on with the next portion of our morning welcome. Before we start the panel discussion that's currently on the schedule, we wanted to also take an opportunity to bring up our honored guests from Hawaii and from the Mohawk Nation. 4 of the 5 presenters have made it in, so they're going to do a short welcome and introduction as well. These are the people who are presenting the breakout sessions along with Joel Isaac, who's doing tribal compacting. These people have traveled a long way to share their knowledge and expertise in the revitalization efforts with their own indigenous languages. So with that, I'd like to start with welcoming Larry to the stage. Larry Kimura.
Ai, and hoa aloha, ako koa aloha. Wow, aka mai, aka mai. That's what they call immersion, yeah, I think. No laila, mahalo anui loa, e olelo Hawaii wau, alo aka mahele olelo. Na Pila Wilson ke ia, me ko uhoa hana o ke koleke o ka hakaula o ke elikolani, me ke po ke koleke o keiki kawai aia.
So I'm going to translate for Larry. So I'm Pila Wilson. I also work at Kakaula, and this is Keiki Kawai Aia, the director of our college.
Ai, ano leila kahi wau ho ike aku nei komo mua o kou I ka hui aina hoi o Amerika hui po ia o kou ke kanaha kumaiwa. Ma kou maha pe pono o ke makaiki kana lima, ka helu kana lima.
So it's so good to be here, and knowing that you in Alaska are the 49th state to enter, and we came in after you, number 50.
Lohe nei au ho eha ia kākou, o pā ia ka kākou, o lelo a pēla wale aku. Aka, nā kākou ke kahi o ke la kule ana I hana o ia hoi. Ho'opoina, nā nui I ka ao o ka Amerika, ke ia la he mea ike, ale ke la ke ala kupono no ka mea he nui nā hana I mua kākou.
Okay, so we've had some pain and discrimination against our languages, but in a sense, we also are responsible for some of that. We focus on becoming a state, being part of America, and put aside some of the native things. Now we have to move forward with our native heritage.
Nui ka o mahalo ke komo ana mai mako kua o ia ka mua a ka huli koke ke alo I mua.
So I was very pleased to see us coming in backwards and getting rid of the negative things and then turn around quickly and face the future.
Mahalo nui loa ia Ivan, ia Sandra, Isima, ke komike ho'olala I ke ia aha nui ka hana, nui ka hau oli ki ike hou ana I nā maka kamaaina me nā maka malihini no ke ia maula e kolu I mua kākou. Mahalo nui loa.
So thanks to the planning committee, and good to see all the familiar faces and also some that we don't know. We're learning and meeting new people here, so it's great to be here. Mahalo nui loa.
Ai, aloha mai kākou. I kia kakaiaka, ua ho'opuka ia no ke ko'i o ka hui alulike ana o ke la olelo, ke ia olelo I waino kākou. I loko no o ka malihini ke kahi o ko ka oia I o anolo ihi loa kia pilina o Hawaii me o ko ma Alakani. Mana kanaiwa I ho ea mai ai no ka ho'omaka e kuka walaau I ka ane halapohe o ka kākou olelo. No leila, loa nā hoa he nui I loko kia lumi a he hauoli wale no ka mako ho ea ana mai no ka ho'omau ana I ka hana pū ana me ka manao loa ke kahi mo manao ko'i e kokua ai I ka kakohana I mua. Mahalo.
So earlier was expressed how important it is for us all to work together. And seeing all of you from all the different languages here is very inspirational. Keiki's reminded by the fact that we've been working together, Hawaii and Alaska, for quite some time, and thinking back into the 1990s and certain things that happened, and so happy to be here and continue this relationship with cousins here in Alaska, and work together, and hope that some of the things that we can bring, although they may be small, will be important and help you in your work. So thank you very much.
And I'd also like to introduce Jeremy Green. He is from the Mohawk Nation, and he has traveled many time zones to be here today. So he's just now joining us all fresh and wide awake now after a rushed rest, but welcome, Jeremy.
Segon de guano hordados. Nene anzaverhage, ne guahunwe scono de guano tonios, uma gahwani serade. Dana oni scono ne nioji non disawada jataway, ne tonowe ni disawat dunjum. Ona e tonowe dun de wada no hordado. Nokoni scono dana jogon, ne nioji wizawayana hawe. Nena ne scut ne underwordy wayanta se, nene ungordon caught sera. So I just wanted to say, very happy that we're all here today and that the path was clear for all of us to make it here safely. And we haven't heard of anywhere places of hardship. And so from this place of peace in our minds, that's where we're going to greet one another. Ne tonowe do yiji adin hordadm. Ize jonhunjade, ne tono de wagena. And also, we would like to greet this place, all the different nations who have gathered here today. Skatne ingwari wayanta se, dosanawanda de wadewanundi ne jinium guarno katsura. And then not ever would we lose our languages. So I'm here to share with you a little bit of what I know and have experienced over the last 25 years in language revitalization. And my people, the Ganyakehaga, the Mohawks, have been at it since about the 1950s and trying to bring our languages back to life. And the whole time, Canada has been trying to get rid of us. And they didn't do a very good job. So that's why I've come here today. One of my mentors, Brian Owanadeka Miracle, he will also be coming, and he'll be sharing his knowledge specifically about adult language immersion programs that create speakers. My area of expertise, I'm going to focus more so on elementary immersion, how to get kids speaking in the classrooms and using the language. So that's what we're going to offer today. I thank you. Yao.
So just want to also extend a thank you, mahalo, to the guests that we had travel here. When we were thinking about this, bringing this institute together, we were aware of the programs that they both come from and have helped to build that have been very successful in producing proficient speakers in their languages. And so we're really grateful that they traveled all this way to help share some of their knowledge and experience of what they were able to accomplish in their homes. And I'm sure they'll talk more of it. I'm more familiar with the Hawaiian story, but I was there in the 1990s, actually, when they were first getting going with some of the schools at the K-12 level or preschool to 12th grade level. And since then, I think there's now 8 of these schools across the Hawaiian Islands, and I think the numbers are something like 10,000 speakers that they've produced. And so I know that not everyone's aware of some of the success of some of the programs that both of those groups of presenters that just shared, but they really come with some real experience that I thought would be valuable for us here in Alaska. to learn from during the time that we're doing this work on our languages. So just a huge thank you from us for committing this time and energy to be here with all of us as we're venturing to lift up this work here for us in Alaska as well. Thank you. Yeah, so we, you know, it was mentioned by several of the facilitators and other people that it takes a tremendous amount of work and energy to pull institute and a gathering like this together, and really, you know, for people that are in positions like mine, it's like we have these big ideas that we get excited about what we want to do, but it's really our staff that are the ones who do the heavy lifting, and they're the ones who say, oh no, what's next? But I can tell you that with this particular vision and idea to do this work, there was enthusiasm among all of our staff and our faculty in CRCD around the importance of this work right now. For our languages, for the people, for the communities. And we did want to acknowledge the staff. First of all, I want to acknowledge Selektuna, who's standing to my right. She came on board with us just in January, and I think it was in her first week when I was like, all right, we got a big project coming up. And she really deserves so much for being really the leader to help facilitate bringing together our team and our staff and faculty and many of the team facilitators to help organize and do the lifting to bring us to this moment. So can we give Selektuna a round of applause? I really, there's often times where I go home at night and think, all I'm good for is talking. Because it's just so much work that goes into these. But we also want to acknowledge other staff that we have in the office that put in a tremendous amount of effort. And one of them we want to introduce to you all, because she's the one who's been in communication with many of you, and she's someone that you can go to during this week if you have questions, as well as Selektuna or myself or anyone that's volunteering at the front desk. But so Ashley Holloway joined our team. So this is the face, right? Of who it. So yes, so I want to really thank Ashley for stepping up. When did you join the team? She joined in October. So a lot of these folks were staffing up because we really know that this work is going to grow. And so thank you, Ashley, for all that you've done to help with it. And now you can connect a face to the name. And she said, let's get this over with so I can go back to work. So that's Ashley. And then the others, I think we may have some of the others in the room. For those, some of you may know that I'm visually impaired, so past this front row, I couldn't tell if they're in here or not really. But okay. So one other that's here is Izzy Martinez, who's standing by the door there. You want to wave, Izzy? So Izzy works as an assistant with me, and so she's a part of not only this effort, but all the other 30 or 40 things that we have moving simultaneous throughout this college. And so I just really want to thank Izzy for all that you do. Really, she's more like the vice chancellor than I am with how much stuff, with how many things move. And so just really thank you, Izzy, for all you do. And then others that are there any others that are here?
Are Scott and Leona outside? They can step in.
So if we have two other of our staff is Scott Culbertson and Leona Long, if they are out there. Looks like they're searching for them. But I'll read off a few others while we're waiting for them. I just also want to acknowledge Amanda Lash, who does all of the travel, John, who also supported with the travel, Sheena, Lisa, and Cecilia, who aren't here. But that makes up the team of folks. So there was, I don't know what the total number is in there, but there was about 10 people that were putting a lot of effort in order to put this together. And so I think Scott walked in. So this is Scott Culbertson. He's our lead registrar. So I just really wanted to acknowledge all of the staff people who put in a tremendous amount of effort. And this institute was kind of extracurricular onto our regular workloads, and so they really did step up above and beyond in order to help us to pull this together. Others that are here that you'll note handling the camera, and they became our IT crew de facto, is Maya Salganik from the Frame program, and she runs our film program here at UAF, and Maya's there. You can give her a round of applause. And then Matt Schiffler and
Kent, I don't know.
And Kent, who will be working with Maya with doing the videography and cameras. So just a round of applause and thank you for everyone. And I know in your organizations, you also had people working to get people here, so we're really thankful for all of that. So now we're gonna shift a little bit to some of the logistics around this institute prior to us inviting up the panelists for the first conversation.
We're going to make this quick because we're running a little behind schedule. So team facilitators, we're going to have you do some of the explanation about the structure of the institute that we went over last night in the team facilitators meeting so that we can cut this big, large talk to the larger group short. But just a few things to note for all the participants here. You have a small program that's half page in size, and if you didn't get one, stop by the information desk and get one. I know that I accidentally handed out some bags without this. At least 3 of you didn't get one. So please stop by and get one. This is the Institute program, and it's going to have a daily schedule included. You should also have received another one-page handout that has the description for the plenaries. We just ran out of room in here, so we made it a one-page handout. The Institute is structured to be flexible so that it meets your needs as an individual learner, language advocate, and the needs of a larger team that you're a part of. So you'll see that there's lots of time and opportunity to meet with your team as well as attend breakout sessions. You're going to meet with your team facilitators this afternoon and start to think out and ahead what breakouts you're interested in, you want to participate in, what breakouts bring knowledge back to the team, and what work you're still going to stay in that team location to do throughout the week. So if you're looking at the breakout sessions and you're getting excited about it, that's good. Bring that excitement into your first team meeting this afternoon. That's going to be happening after lunch. Yvonne mentioned earlier, we very intentionally built in networking time because this work can't be done alone. This work can't be done by one team. So there are large pockets of time when we get back on schedule where we really intend for you to work with other people, connect with other people from other groups, from even your own team, and spend that extra time talking. To help you in this, your name tags are color-coded. So if I hear that there's some really cool documentation work going on in the Gwich'in team room, I'm going to look for the color that's Gwich'in, and it's here on the back. You can look in here, and you'll see the team colors. And so as you guys talk and network and learn about some really key strategies that you're going to get excited about and you want to talk with someone about, you can reference the back page here and then find someone with that color and start a conversation with them. Ask them questions. So that's been built in. Let's see what else is important before the team facilitators can. We do have, down in the multi-level lounge, we have an elders area. So multi-level lounge is where we came out of this morning, that split level place. There's an area there that's going to be for elders to relax and gather in. So make sure that we're all taking care of our elders and making sure they know where that is and that they can go there as needed. We haven't mentioned this yet, but I think some of you have already taken opportunity of it. This institute is being offered for 2 credits if you're interested. Tribal Management 250. The course descriptions are out there. Scott, the guy who came in and waved his hand this morning, he's our lead registrar. He'll take your payment. We're only taking credit card and check right now for the course, but the course paperwork is out here. It's $75, 2 credits. You can see him for more information. I think everything else can wait, right? I'm going to help provide your team facilitators some leverage here. One of the outcomes of the Institute is that on Thursday afternoon, we start during lunch, every language team, all 8 teams, do a short 10-minute presentation, short so that we can get through them all, about the work that they've done this week and what they hope to do next. And since everyone here is going to be learning about setting a vision for their team, they're going to be learning key strategies for lexicon support, all kinds of strategies. We really want an opportunity for everyone in the room to see what's happened this week and where the different language teams think they're headed beyond when they leave the Institute. And that opportunity will be on Thursday. So as team participants, be thinking about that, how we can help inform that presentation on Thursday for everyone else to learn from.
5-minute presentation. So yeah, so just to clarify, she said 10-minute presentation on Thursday. It's actually only 5 minutes. 10 minutes for 10 groups in a room full of indigenous peoples. You guys will be going home Friday night. So we're gonna do that 5-minute presentations for each team, and in your team, you will be able to work on that over the course of these few days that we're together and determine who's gonna be the designated presenter for your team to kind of report back to the larger group. And so I think Sandy really covered a lot of the logistics of this. We really did build out the Institute to be very flexible so that we can maximize the value of the work that's happening within each of the teams, and your facilitators will cover that. So with that, I think we can transition to the first panel. And so we structured the Institute to have 3 plenary panels, just one for each of the mornings of the Institute. Yes, one for each of the 3 mornings of the Institute, and then the presentation on the 4th day, which will be in the afternoon, because we really wanted to maximize the time in your teams to do the work. So the 3 plenaries that we're going to cover, the first one this morning that we'll be covering a conversation with a few people who've been involved at different levels and layers of language revitalization work, having a conversation about where we at right now within our state with Alaska Native languages. On tomorrow morning, the Hawaiian language delegation will be doing a presentation and conversation that's going to be more forward-thinking and visionary related to some of the work that they've done. And I think that's going to be a more interactive plenary with the whole group here. And then on Wednesday morning's plenary, the Alaska Native Language Preservation Advisory Council will be facilitating a conversation with all of us around big picture thinking about where do we need to go to really take, for example, the spark of this institute and blow it up much bigger for us to really start turning the tide with language revitalization in the state. And so those are going to be the 3 plenary sessions that we'll be hosting. So with that, I'd like to invite up for this first plenary conversation, April Counselor, Joel Isaac, Cordelia Kelly, Hune, and I think those are our 4 panelists that we'll have up for, well, it's not really a panel per se. We have some chairs and a couple mics, and I think we're just going to have this be as if though you all were sitting in on a evening tea conversation at one of our houses, is the way that I think we're going to have this looking like. So let's move the chairs a little bit more towards the front of the stage, because this conversation is going to be live streamed online. And we want people who are tuning in across the state or maybe nationally to be able to hear see who it is that's talking. They're organizing themselves alphabetically. Just Jatinya. I joke. Which alphabet? That's right. All right. So I'm going to moderate, but also be a part of this conversation. So in pulling together the Institute, Language Revitalization Institute, I began to think about this big question of where are we really at right now with our languages? And of course, because I work here at the university, I began to think within the University of Alaska system, where are we at in doing this language work across our state? And so I had a short conversation with a couple of people in the university just to try to get a sense of where we're at within the university. And for the 20 Alaska Native languages that we have in our state, currently we have 3 full-time language research faculty and 4 language instructor faculty. That's the total number of full-time faculty that we have within the UA system across the state. This includes UAF, UAS, and UAA working on languages. Of the 4 Alaska Native language faculty that we have that are full-time, we only have we have Tlingit, Yukdun, Inupiaq, and Gwich'in. So as far as I know, those are the only 4 languages that are currently being taught by full-time instructor faculty within the University of Alaska system. And of those 4 languages that are being taught, only 2 of them are being taught all the way up to a 4-year program. And that would be Yukdun and Tlingit. There's capacity for some of the others, but they're not currently being taught beyond the first year or 2. And so and I take that back, there's 5 full-time instructors because one of our lead facilitators, Sally Sampson, was just hired on. So there's actually 2 Yukdun faculty, 1 in Bethel and 1 here in Fairbanks, but just a single native language faculty for those other languages. There are a few other languages, though, being taught through the UA system, but they're being taught by adjunct faculty who are basically hired in to just teach a 3-credit class. And so there's a few other languages that are being taught in one-off sections, but not having full dedicated language faculty working on them. And so I guess that was one of the, when I began to look at kind of where are we at within the University of Alaska system, that's what I came up with some of the place of the capacity that we have right now and where the investment's at. And so my first question kind of down the way from your perspective, and I know we come from different backgrounds, and so answer it however you would like to answer it, but this question of kind of like where are we at? And I also wanted to start off by acknowledging that some of what I just shared and some of what some of us might be talking about in this first question might feel like a little bit of a downer in some sense of the word, but I think that it's also really important for us to understand really where are we at? Where is our current capacity? Because that will feed into then our conversations on Tuesday when we're visioning a bit more, and then on Wednesday when we really talk about where we need to go. And so I just wanted to frame that as well in this first question of where are we at? So I'll start by handing it over to April.
Chimayan, thank you. I think that the question about where we are at, there is a lot of different ways that you can look at it. And we don't currently, from the perspective of the Alaska Native Language Preservation and Advisory Council, or from the university system, or from any of the community-based programs, there is no current study or way that we estimate the number of speakers that we have for the languages that we have in our state. The ANLPAC report that came out in January had some very vague estimates that I'm not even really willing to go over here in front of the group, because I feel that we can all pretty much be in agreement that the languages in Alaska are in a state of emergency. The numbers don't matter as much as the fact that we're here gathered together because we know that if we don't do something, that what our children have and what our grandchildren have is going to look very, very different. I do now consider myself a language teacher, which I didn't for a long time. But I think that we often underestimate ourselves, and even those of us who coordinate the language and don't feel fully fluent are also an incredibly scarce resource around Alaska. We deal with a situation where learners who want to learn our language are sometimes intimidated to do so, and elders who want to teach the language are sometimes socially isolated and unable to participate. We know that while language learning can be a protective factor against negative behaviors and activities, including suicide, we also know that learning a language can be really difficult for learners. We often have to have conversations in our community, telling each other, telling our elders, telling other learners, we need to stop criticizing each other. We need to stop making fun of how people say their words. We know that early learners don't say things correctly, but yet, even though we talk about it in groups, sometimes in action I see learners getting hurt and leaving the language movement. Out of the 12 or so language learners that we started with in our Master Apprentice project in 2004. Can you raise your hand if you were one of the original Alutiiq language apprentices? There's 2 of us. We also have some elders here in the room that were here from the very beginning, but we also now see a new crop of learners coming up, and that is something that I'll want to talk about a little bit more in the Where Are We Going section. If you're a newer language learner for our Alutiiq region, can you raise your hand? These people also need to really be acknowledged because it takes so much bravery to put yourself out there and speak the language when you know that you're going to get criticized for learning the wrong dialect, for saying the wrong word or saying it incorrectly. I'm just so very, very proud of those learners who didn't give up and the elders that didn't give up on them. Koyana.
I think where we're at, there's kind of 3 things that comes to mind. One, we're at a very critical moment, and we're at a very fortunate moment in time. And the reason why I feel like we're fortunate is we're at a critical mass stage that's been achieved through decades of hard work, and there's a younger generation that's wanting to take hold of it and receive the baton. And there's the older generation that's been passing on the baton, and sometimes there weren't hands ready to hold it of living Indigenous students. Sometimes those batons were passed on to linguists in a way. And that's part of where I feel like we're at in Ifdeni'ina. We still have living elders. We've had some dialects, but we no longer have living elders. And that's like the outer dialect where I live in Kenai, in Soldotna. And so what we're doing, where we're at, is we're working cross dialects amongst all of them to bring back life into dialects that have been sleeping. And I think that's the power of some of those tools that may have been recorded or felt like some people might feel like language was stolen or taken, but it was kind of protected in a way. And I feel like where we're at with the Deni'ina efforts, we have a very low number of fluent speakers, and we're separated geographically. We're very fortunate in Kenai where Helen has moved across the inlet about 200 miles and is not living in her home. She's living over on our side to be able to work with us and with her family. And I think that's invaluable. That's the state of what we're at and what we have to do. There's those big moves that have to be made. And there's some sacrifices, but I don't feel like sacrifice is the right English word. I think it's like there's work that has to be done, because I don't view the different career paths that I could have go on and me choosing to not do them to work with Helen. That's not a sacrifice. That's a fantastic opportunity to be able to do that. And sometimes it may be rough days where there's all the opposition that's coming in from different voices, whether it's within the community, whether it's without the community, that are attacking. And that's where the burden can come on. But I think part of it is that what I feel like we're trying to do within the project that we're working on is where my role is to act as a protector for when there's pockets that are able to happen, and to me that's happening in the family. And I think that's part of the criticism that happens is amongst our own people, and that there's this idea of nepotism that we can't have family working with family. And it's like, well, that's absurd in the Native community. And I think it's absurd in a lot of ways. So it's been really awesome to see Helen work with her granddaughter and her great-granddaughter, and Jaslyn's 2.5, and that's a fantastic thing. And Jaslyn's gonna pass me with language work. I'm about a 1.5-year-old in formal learning. And I can talk more linguistically about language than Jaslyn can, but she can pronounce things better than I can sometimes. And I think that's like where we're at, is at that moment where we've listened for that language transmission to happen. And we have to protect that when there's people and there's families that want to do that. That's what we're after. That's what we write grants for. That's what we want laws to change for, is to where we can have that in the home in our own lives again, and not have to have the shame or the fear to be able to walk down the sidewalk and be speaking in our languages or singing songs. We can do that in the open, and to have our children not have that fear taught to them. And I think that's where we're at. And it's happening all over the state. And the exciting thing for me, again, like where are we at? We're all here together to be able to share that, because we're all in isolation in a way because of what the systems that try and keep us in isolation. And some of those things, sometimes they may seem like linguistic mechanisms that separate us from being able to understand our languages. Some of them maybe seem like laws where at school we can't even teach our languages in our schools. Other things might be economic, the idea that our way of life is fiscally represented, where it's like, no, we aren't equivalent, we're not equating land to money. That's a huge barrier. And so when we can do that in our homes to have that sovereignty to live and feel safe, I think is where we're at that stage. Janan.
So first I'm going to share a little bit about who I've learned from, because the things that I'll share live in that context. So Aloruk Miungarunga, so my family's from Wainwright, and I've been able to learn from and work with a number of partners from the North Slope, but also growing really great relationships with those in the Northwest and into the Bering Straits regions. I had the opportunity to live in Juneau and Southeast for a little bit, and being able to get to know a number of young learners and Hune and others, and my great friend Susie Edwardson, and getting to know the Haida group and the Haida team that are doing the amazing work down in Southeast, and living there for a while, and the Tsimshian learners as well. I'm a grad student with UAF, so I'm closing my master's program in rural development, and I did my first year of grad school here, and being able to get to know a number of interior groups and young learners here, working with a lot of the young learners, and being involved in the Indigenous women's group as well. And also living in Anchorage and having a good relationship with First Alaskans. My fellowship to Juneau was through First Alaskans, and anytime you're in one of those hubs, you get to know people from all over the state and all of the young learners. So all of that is to say that there's a lot of conversation that's happening with a lot of young learners, and that's what I want to bring to this discussion. So young learners, the experience of the second language learner, and then also the work that's being done at the grassroots level. So there's definitely a lot of fresh energy from young people who do want to learn, and who have to learn from those who have been creating content and curriculum and teaching for decades. And so we're really excited to be able to learn from you and work with you. And I'm looking at a number of them sitting here in the front with the Inupiaq group. So really great respect for that work. So the yearning to learn is there. However, we are seeing a gap between first language speakers and those who do want to learn. Oftentimes with our first language speakers, you don't remember how it is that you learned a language. And with us second language speakers, we oftentimes don't know how to learn a language ourselves. And so that was shared a little bit with with the panelists already too, about the experience of learning a language. So there's also that great gap between generations, and more broadly, kind of like an urban-rural divide when it comes to language revitalization movement and language revitalization concepts, and a lot of the things that are really, or maybe a little bit more commonplace to those in the room, might not be so much to our cousins and counterparts working at the village level. So when there are efforts like hometown name changes, maybe there's some question about why that work is important. So how is it that we enhance knowledge equity between all of us that are kind of doing this work day to day, and all of our cousins and, like I said, peers and counterparts working at the village level? So because of the great changes between generations, it also gives rise to a number of different questions, and the need for collective discussions to work on answering some of these questions. That may include the question of dialect. In some of our languages, like what are the decisions that we need to be making in the future? And how do we have those discussions? At what point do we make those decisions? Who has the authority to make those decisions for long-term language planning? Is there long-term language planning, not within organizations, but within languages? Like not within organizations, but within, our people and communities. And I'm really happy, to see like our Inupiaq team, for example, because we are 3 regions. We have 3 boroughs, and to be able to come together and grow in unity and a sense of nationhood, because we really are going to need one another. Oh, 2 boroughs, excuse me, sorry. Yeah, 2 boroughs, excuse me, but 3 regions. So what are those decisions that we need to make? Another is, what are the protocols for long-term language planning? Again, not with organizations, but within community members. And also, how do we enhance, intersectionality? So the idea that you have different areas that intersect or cross. So how do we enhance intersectionality so that those who are doing this work are not siloed? How do we cross more into education? How do we cross this work into business? How do we cross this work into how it is that we govern ourselves and conducting our own meetings, in our language? How do we enhance the casual speaking of some language instead of this all or nothing atmosphere? April spoke a little bit about the experience of the second language learner and creating that space for adult language learners to practice and make mistakes. A lot of our young peers, we say to ourselves that we give babies up to 5 years to practice and bumble and practice making the speech sounds, but we don't afford adult second language learners the same privilege. And we need to create that space to be babies in the language as well. And then also, how do we increase understanding of why our language is important? Because you see that question even within a number of our own communities and a number of our own people, and the divides that we have maybe between organizations where you have, business leaders and you have like the political leaders, and then you have, the cultural leaders. How is it that we're not siloed? Because this work, it's our life and it's who we are, and it's not a hobby, and it belongs to everyone. And there's room for everyone to incorporate some part of this into what it is that we're all doing. So there are many questions, but I pose these as questions because with every question, there is also opportunity, right? And the bigger the question, the bigger the opportunity. So that's a little bit about where we're at from a second language learner, young learner's perspective.
Koyana. First, I would like to just say Koyana to Esther, who gifted me my first ever kaspak from my father's people. I'm so happy. Thank you for that today. And I want to acknowledge, we've got to celebrate when we get a breath of fresh air. And Waki Charles was tenured this year, and I don't know if we've ever had an indigenous person tenured in the University of Alaska who teaches Alaska Native languages, and now we have 2. So I'm very happy. So when I think about the question, where are we at? I have to be upfront with some of the things that I try to do. I try to create safe places for people to learn. I try to push myself to continue to learn and to accept teachings. And so I'm always thankful for my elders and my teachers who guide me and correct me, and they'll let me know if I'm saying something wrong or doing something wrong, because people make mistakes. And so I think, well, what do we do when we feel like we're failing? And those are some of the things that I think about. And so one of the things that I also try to do is, as I raise my children in our language, and I'm very thankful for my wife, Mariah, and for the space that we've created for them where I don't have to talk to them in English. They can just understand everything that I say. And so another area is trying to create structural changes. And so that's kind of an area that I would like to sort of answer this question with. Where are we at? One of my life missions is to burn down the fort of white privilege. And so what I mean by that is they're a privilege not particularly of an individual, but of a whole group. Because I spent some time, when I first met Michael Krauss, he said, you need to go to the old people and get them to record what happened to them. And so I did. I went to quite a few of them, and I collected some of those stories. And then as I sort of shared those stories, some people get really uncomfortable, unless, because people tortured children. People set up structures so you had to stop speaking your language in order to vote. You had to stop speaking your language in order to put your kids into a desegregated school. You had to do all of these different things. And you got attacked in your community. You got told that your language was not enough, was not intelligent, and all these different things. And now it's just this thing that kind of happened. And so there's an absence of social accountability. And so I'm trying to figure out who do we send the bill to, And so for me, there's a number of different ways I think about that, because we can have people today who'll say, well, we can't have, Tlingit full-time in the school because we have to get them ready. And I think, well, what are you getting them ready for? It's a world where our language doesn't exist on our own land. So some of the ways we've gone about trying to facilitate some of those changes is through sometimes legislative action. So there's a team that I work with. I get a lot of influence from the cohort that I'm in at Kahakaula Ke'elikelani College of Hawaiian Language, including Deho and Tinek Pungi and several others who are in Hawaii. And then our teachers, Larry, Keiki, Pila, Kawanoi, and others who we can just sort of talk to about how do you identify and create change. And then in Alaska, there's a team that I work with a lot, Liz Medicine Crow, Jonathan Christ Tompkins, Reed Magdans, Barbara Blake, lots of others. And some of that is brainstorming ideas, and some of that is putting those ideas into action. So one of the walkthroughs is at the national level, we have the Native American Languages Act. We also have the Every Student Succeeds Act, which had recently a lot of action from the National Coalition of Native American Languages and Programs, which you could involve yourself in if you're looking for how do I become part of this national movement. Statewide, there's been a number of things just sort of highlighting the formation of the Alaska Native Language Center in 1972, the formation of the Alaska Native Language Preservation and Advisory Council, making Alaska Native languages the co-official languages of Alaska, and then recently a resolution urging the governor to declare a linguistic emergency. And so that's kind of where we're at as far as sort of these pieces of legislation. But really what these things do is just kind of set the stage. They set the stage because we're coming to get what's owed to Alaska Native languages. And so a lot of that, it takes a lot of, we gotta really debate a lot of people who feel like our languages are a threat to English, are a threat to budgets. So it's also really trying to push back on this idea of a linear, finite world, which is how the Euro-American English world tends to see things. Oh, there's just not enough time, there's not enough money, we've got to do this stuff, we've got to do that stuff. And so we keep pushing back on that with what we would call time immemorial and these other types of concepts, and say, if we can get people thinking in multiple languages, we'll actually just be better. And so we have some people in our region in Juneau who say, well, I don't really support an immersion school because you can't teach science in Tlingit. And that person doesn't know anything about Tlingit. Like, I haven't seen them in the classrooms. And so it's amazing to me that another part of this privilege is you can talk about languages. Like, you can't publicly, people can be really racist, right? But in a public forum, this was someone who was running for the school board and they won in Juneau. But could he stand there and say, oh, well, Japanese people aren't good at psychology. Oh, well, Jewish people aren't good at math. You can't really say those things anymore. You can say that about a whole language. And so it's a really interesting situation, because on the other side of that situation, we're strategizing for some legislation. I said, well, we should have a special organization, Alaska Native Language School Board, that just takes care of language nests and immersion schools. And that's really what it focuses on. And then we'll get the same dollar amount. Actually, we should get more money because there's going to be so few of us. And because all of this stuff that happened to us that we didn't ask for. And then, one of my colleagues who's an ally, who's in the fight, said, well, if there's anything that gives people more and they think it's because they're Alaska Native, it'll fail, because you can't give people special privileges in Alaska based on their ethnicity. And I said, well, any more? And I said, well, we're all equal, except in terms of inequity. Yeah, and so just trying to sort of continue to think about those. What are the strategies and the things we're going to put in place? And so, and we'll talk about that stuff on Wednesday and maybe a little bit more now. But that's kind of the where are we at. I watched all these old people who taught me things. I started learning Tlingit 23 years ago. And all those people, their words are still with me, but I watch them pass away. And I just keep thinking, when is this thing really going to turn the corner? So, we can be happy that we're making 5, 10 speakers every few years. But how are we going to get there? I remember I talked to someone in Hawaii, and they said, I distinctly remember this time when I didn't know everybody who spoke Hawaiian. That's what I want, where people come and just speak Tlingit. I'm like, I don't even know who you are. This is awesome. This is amazing. So that's the vision. That's the goal. So I challenge your teams. Where are you going to be in 30 years? Think big. Look way ahead. That's what they kept telling us in Hawaii, is challenge us. Because as I looked in Hawaii, I said, that's what I want. And then, but it would take probably 30 years to build it. Yeah, we're going to cheese.
So basically, a couple other elements, I guess, to wrap up the where are we at piece, and then I'm going to jump into the next question. So you heard me share, that right now we only have, 4 languages really that we have full-time language faculty in the UA system, and 3 language researchers, and clearly we need many more than that. That's going to be a part of some of the conversation. I think that's going to be a part of these next 4 days. And out of this, hopefully there'll be some, many of us who are advocates in this room, thinking big about what do we really need to be pushing for in order to shift gears on a larger scale. At the preschool through 12th grade level, though, really, where are we at? And again, I think that one of the things that was shared about the Alaska Native Language Preservation Advisory Committee report that was that there really needs to be an understanding and an assessment of where we're really at with our languages across the state, because we really don't have that. I know that many people come to me because of my job here at the university, and they say, Yvonne, we're working on this grant report. Give me the number of Danaka speakers. And it's like I'm supposed to know the number of Danaka speakers or the number of you name it speakers. And so I know that some of that information is important for us. On the preschool through 12th grade level, I think I'm only aware of a couple immersion schools. I think we have what I would consider an immersion school, or what I think of as an immersion school. We have a Yuktun immersion schools, one in Bethel. I think one was just opened in Anchorage. There may be some in a couple of the villages. And then we have an immersion school in Kikiktagruk in Kotzebue, Nikechua there. And I think those might be the only immersion schools. There's some language teaching that's happening in some other schools across the state, like the one at the Yanida'a school in Chicaloon. But really, that's where we're at as far as immersion schools in the state. And so I think both, when I think about where we're at that preschool through 12th grade level, and then also at the post-secondary level, we have a lot of room to grow we have a lot of capacity there, I guess, to put resources and to really step things into action at those levels. So the next question that I want to throw out is, that's a little bit of a brief overview of where we're at. What things from your perspectives are happening and have been happening right now that excite you about where we're moving forward? And one of the things that I'll share to open up for my reflection is there's many people actually in this room who were a part of a tour that we did with Verna Kirkness, who is from the University of British Columbia, where she took a group of Alaska Native and Native Hawaiians in 1999, and we toured through Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, from tribe to tribe, learning about their language nest movement with the Kohanga Reo and their languages. And then we ended up in 1999 on the Big Island in Hawaii, and we're looking at some of the language immersion work that was happening there as a part of the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. And I was a younger man back then in 1999, and I remember coming back to Alaska and feeling supercharged and energized because of seeing what the Maori people had done with bringing their language, reversing the trend of loss there, and really excited about it. And that was one of my earliest waves of trying to push really hard on myself and in the community to try to be a part of this revitalization work for a round of our languages. But I remember at the time, I don't know if I can remember any young people who had successfully learned their language to a level of proficiency where they were able to have conversations. So this was 19 years ago. What really excites me about what I'm seeing happen right now in these recent years is that there is a younger generation of people who are acquiring proficiency in Alaska Native languages to a level where they're able to be in these full conversations. And there's a growing number of our young people and adults. Someone mentioned, like, you're never too old to start learning your language. And I can't tell you from a younger person's perspective, it's inspiring to see an elder going after their language and using it too alongside the young people. That's so empowering to see that. And so what excites me with what I'm seeing right now is that we have this growing number of people, young and old, who are making the personal commitment to put in that hard work to gain proficiency in their language. And from that perspective, I feel like in my role as in education is we need to work as hard as we can to make these opportunities available to as many people as possible so that those who are ready to make that commitment, wanting to come. And then I think the other piece of what I want to share as far as what we're thinking about is young people also in these recent years have come to me and they say, well, so many of our elders and people say, learn your language, but then where's our future if we put so much time into learning our language? And I think this ties into something that Cordelia brought up, is the intersection between this language work and all the other work that happens. And so I think that my last piece on this that I'll share is, for example, if we really do ratchet up and create language proficiency programs at the post-secondary level in the university so that after 4 or 5 years we're producing people able to speak in their language, why don't we couple that with a teacher training program so that they're certified teachers who could teach through their language? And if at the same time we're doing the work to create these language immersion schools, there's jobs for those young people or older people who go back to school for a second or third career to then make their way back into a job at these immersion schools. And so we start building value. And I know that Hune has shared other ideas in the past. I really love hearing him share, like, why can't we pay a little bit more to those who go to work for Tanana Chiefs Conference or Coeric or Manilik? If they're proficient in their language, they get a little bit of bump in pay. So there's an incentive for them to be pursuing their language as well. And so I think about, from an organizational perspective, how do we create that intersectionality so that we continue to build more and more value into learning our languages for our people as well? So I guess those are a few things that as we're thinking, like, what's happening right now, where's the thinking at, and around where we're moving.
Thank you. I think in terms of where we are going, as I've been listening to the other members of this panel share their wisdom about language revitalization, language acquisition, one thing that keeps coming to my mind, and it's sort of related to that intersectionality, which is language normalization. It's sort of a new thing in our region. And I think it really started to come into discussion after the last WIPSI conference when some of our people went and they were talking with some of the Hawaiians and some of the other language groups and hearing this new term. Because ever since we started really industriously working on our language revitalization in the early 2000s, we've been razor focused on fluency, fluency, fluency for everyone. And it was like this really strong commitment to gaining fluency, which was important. But one thing that we did not do at that time was prepare the community for the fluent speakers that were coming up. And now in Kodiak, we're starting to do different things to try to get the broader community, those who are latent speakers, those who want their grandchildren to speak, but they're not going to become speakers, people who have learned some of the language, but then for life reasons have moved outside of the language movement, and just the general public. In Kodiak City, the Native population is under 10%. And so we struggle, even among other minority groups in our community, to gain the visibility for our efforts. And in general, when people know that there is a language movement, they're like, oh, good, they're saving it. I feel great because someone's saving our language. Well, they don't know how desperate we are, right? And those of us who are working in the language all the time feel an incredible pressure, especially when they feel that the rest of the community isn't aware and supportive of those efforts. And so where I see the language movements going is a continued focus on developing fluency among our young kids, among our young adults, even among the elders that want to learn, but also having a sort of second tier, a second circle, where we help teach our community to be supportive of us. One of the things that has been happening in Kodiak is we're developing new products in some of the stores or for handouts that have language on them. We're doing a article in the newspaper every week to talk about different aspects of the language, both historical and current, what it's like to be a learner, just trying to get people to feel a little bit more like the language movement might be open to them. In the past, because we had such a small group of language learners, it almost felt to outsiders like it was a clique, like it was something they couldn't break into, that they couldn't break into that unless they were willing to devote their entire life, 24 hours a day, to learning the language. We know that not everyone in our community has that ability. Either they're still holding on to intergenerational trauma, or they have children and they have other things that they need to do for their own survival. But we need to think of those people as being part of the movement too. They're the second circle of our movement. And if we can attend to them, then overall our communities will be more conducive for language revitalization. When I was, this was probably about 10 years ago or more, I went to a language conference down in the lower 48. And the speaker, whose name I can't remember, she talked about language revitalization in terms of it being a res car and how, it's a rough and tumble sort of existence. We're trying to fit everybody into that vehicle. And there are some people that don't even maybe want to come along. They're sort of just along for the ride. That's the second circle in my understanding. When I was in graduate school and worked on my thesis, I converted that symbol into an ungyak for our people, which is our open skin boat. It's like an umiak. And for us, I feel like our language revitalization is like that ungyak. We have people who are paddling hard right now, but they're not paddling hard to arrive at the destination with an empty boat. We need to bring our community members with us along for the ride, and there may be a time when they're ready. Even if they're not ready now, we need to get that whole community to that destination. And so that's what I'm hoping to see here as we move forward in the future here in Alaska. Kuiana.
There's something that has stuck with me since the first Alaska Native Studies conference when Dr. Smith did a keynote and he talked about passports and PhDs, which seems like a very maybe Western construct for you have documentation and you have the epitome of Western academia. And why do we need those in the Native community? The way that I kind of translate that conceptually is citizenship where you're not part human. You're not a blood quantum DNA valued person. We don't take blood quantum tests to American citizens and say, how much blood quantum are you for United States of America? That's not done. We are whole human beings. And I can be a Denaina person, and I can be a Greek person, and I can be a Judeo-German person all at the same time. I don't have to segregate out parts of who I am. And so as far as where we're going and where we're at, I think that's part of it, is really owning that. That's the passport part. We are whole human beings who have had parts of us ripped out and held in captivity, or tried to rip out of us, but you can't actually rip that out of us. It's always there. And so that's part of that healing process, for having the courage or the feeling that you can own who you are, and you don't have to hide that. You don't have to be ashamed of that. And that's part of what wraps into language work, is that idea of the whole human. And there's different ways you can articulate that. One might be a passport. One is knowing who you are as a way to articulate that. And then the PhD component of it, there's nothing that says it has to be a Western PhD construct. To me, it's education. And what do we need for education? Where are we going with education? We have to have people who are willing to do the work to become teachers, or who are teachers, to have the avenue to then teach. And ultimately, it's about the students. It's about the kids coming up through that program. Because you can have all the best stuff in the world, but if you don't have that community support, that buy-in, a place where a parent, a grandparent, a guardian feels like, I'm going to put my child in this school because I feel like they're safe. That, to me, is where that PhD component comes in. There is a need for Western academia to be able to navigate the system, but we can't put all of the epitome, all of the high pinnacle achievement on that Western academic achievement. It's nothing to negate. It's a positive thing. It's a good thing to get PhDs, I feel, but it's also not the end point. That to me is a segue to something else, perhaps. And I think that we can do something in academia that's never been done before in Alaska. And the way that I look at it, and I think about where we are at in Denaina, where we do not have an edited, published verb dictionary. And a lot of us in the room, we're verb-based people. So when people come to us and like, we want this translated, and they give me a noun, and I'm like, well, here's the 5 things I need from you, and I need a paragraph to explain what context, and if this is which type of verb it is, and they look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, I can't translate this for you until we have a conversation. And that's part of the importance of a verb dictionary for a language group that has dialects that have no living speaker. So a little bit of glimpsing into the future, what do you do when there's no one alive who speaks your language? How do you bring it back? And to me, you bring the audio recordings, you have the material culture, you spend time on the land, because the land is our teacher. So if you understand the land, you understand the language. So there's all those components that go into that. And the caveat to talking about like grammar and dictionaries and all those things that may get people's like hackles raised, like, no, you don't use grammar to learn language. It's definitely not the only thing you can do. But it also, for me, it shows the way that I think. It gives me a way to articulate the way that I think. And where I think the next step is for us as Indigenous people is to translate, and I use the word translate with a caveat as well, to, in our own words, talk about what our language means. Because if we can talk about that, not as a mode aspect string or a stem or as a neuter, imperative, all those different things that we talk about, if we were to use our own Kanaga, our own language, to shape that view, we're not talking about linguistics, we're talking about the actual morphemes. Another way to view them is the vibrational sounds. We're talking about sound. The frequency that sounds they affect us. And that's, to me, what grammar does. That's grammar in my perspective. That's the way I see it. And I think that for so long, there's been a divide that's been created because there's this other linguistic language that's like not regular people's English, it's linguistic as English, which to me is fascinating. I'm a nerd. I'm like, that's really cool. Who would call that? So that gets me excited. I'm happy about that. I enjoy that discovery. I do understand that's not everybody's cup of tea, for sure. So part of what we can do, though, is to translate that, and not with English as a hierarchy, but how do we talk about this in our own language to our own people? And thinking about the illustration I like to use is the vowels. What's the difference? Why do we have orthography? Why do we need to learn how to write? What's the purpose? And the difference between what an I means, that E versus eh, they carry different meanings. And so when you can visually represent that on paper, that's great. Ultimately, it's the sound that to me is the most important. But those written representations are critical, because sound, that frequency has power. And it's derived, to me, I view it as derived from the land. So you're experiencing an understanding of the natural world and the spiritual realm and what makes us who we are as people through the way our languages sound. And if grammar were taught from that way, that to me has power. And if the endpoint is fluency and understanding, like cultural fluency, understanding what's behind it, not linguistics fluency, but really understanding who we are as a whole person, that to me is a possibility of where we're going, and one of the things that makes me really excited. So for all the nerds out there who like grammar, woohoo! For those of you who don't, we can do other stuff too, because it's all part of the pieces. So Chicken Nick for listening to me go on about grammar.
So caring is contagious, right? So how many of you know that caring is contagious? I see you know that. See you know that over there. Absolutely. So there is a realization that raising belief in the language is just as important as raising maybe funds for a project, right? We have to raise belief in our languages, because it's through that raised belief you can secure funds in a project or a grant. You can help pass, legislation and some of those structural things that Hune was talking about. That belief in our language, I think about it in a context of, when you have a congressionally mandated fiduciary duty to provide a return for your shareholders in that boardroom, why is language important, right? Raising the belief and understanding that English is not a replacement for our languages within our own people and our own communities and the broader Alaskan, community as well. Like, our languages came from the land, they work on the land, and there's never going to be a replacement for that. Also, the trend of accessibility. There's so many different creative conversations that are happening about like the UA system and others about how do we enhance exposure with our languages, because that exposure is so important. There's a conversation of yes, we do need to, take our more advanced speakers and bring them deeper into master apprenticeship, but also we don't leave behind that exposure component, because you never know who's going to get turned on, just flick of a switch, in just showing up to a language class, a language circle, informal gathering, and how that could change the trajectory of that person's life and the trajectory of another person's life. And together, that's how you have a movement. And I see that with a lot of our young learners, and I can think most closely, of course, with our Inupiaq group. You have a number of people who have been doing this work with our language across regions, 3 regions, 2 boroughs, for decades, and those who have been learning from them. But then you also have a whole other group of passionate, dedicated, committed learners, and we as a group, as a young cohort, didn't exist maybe 3 years ago. I can name easily 5 or 7 other learners that are working on this, that we all just had exposure in a class, and it turned on a switch. And then those people are actively teaching languages through the Heritage Center in their homes as well. And so that does connect with, this grassroots movement that's also happening with our Alaska Native languages. So because of all of this young energy with our languages, but then also the limited official organizational capacities to kind of do this work also as your day job, for whatever, number of reasons, you do see young people leading and doing this work regardless of title or financial compensation. And that's really, really wonderful, to be able to work with those doing, this work in the organizations, but then also people saying, like, I can absolutely do this. And this looks like a number of different things across languages, whether it's, Facebook groups like Speak Gwich'in to me, Speak Inupiat to me. You have a number of speakers or young learners who are creating content, even if they're not fluent, they're creating content because there's this idea that somebody told me, a Koyakan learner told me years ago that stuck, is that you don't have to know everything to teach. You just have to know more than people in the room, or you just have to know more than those that you are teaching, and together, hand in hand, as a generation, you can move together in the language. You can do that together. And so those types of creative thinking to kind of break the things that we have in our mind. I once heard someone say that maybe you said, the benefits of maybe using the word style instead of dialect, because maybe it breaks down some conceptual barriers that we've placed with ourselves, right? Was that really you? Oh, it was her region, okay. Heard it through the language grapevine, so going up to your region for that wonderful piece of wisdom. So we see home language circles, kind of akin to how a number of people do Bible studies. So do you have the opportunity to just get together and in somebody's home and work together on progressing. There's something that was created a couple years ago, the Alaska Native Language Digest. How many of you are subscribed to that? Yeah, so there's opportunity for more people to subscribe as well. There is a need. There's a group of second language learners, and we thought, wow, we don't really see like a digest devoted specifically to Alaska Native languages, and that was created. And there's opportunity for that to grow more robust, but that was just another side project. A couple of years ago, there was also the first Alaska Native Language Summit. So we have a number of different pockets where we can discuss language. We have the Alaska Native Studies Conference. We have, the Heritage Center. We have regional discussions. But we asked ourselves, those organizers also asked themselves, where is the convening solely based on Alaska Native languages? And so the first one was held in 2016 in Juneau. Hune was there. And our guests actually were attending that, and that's also something that's in the works. In October of this year, organizers call it a pop-up language summit. So you never know when it's gonna kind of happen, but it will happen this fall as well. And so as we look at what can come out of this discussion, maybe that fall summit is an opportunity to connect and continue that discussion statewide. And again, that was just a grassroots effort of second language learners. Anything from apps as well. So how many of you have Chert on your mobile device? Okay, so for those of you who text in your language or are interested in texting in your language, there's a second language learner who worked with his brother, and his brother is a computer programmer, and he's a language learner, and they noticed that a lot of speakers and learners were using some kind of shortcut or some kind of shorthand to text in your language. For us with the N with the tail, a lot of my friends would just capitalize the N and to kind of denote that. So filling that need, they worked together and they created an app. So you can download that app to your phone. It's called Chert, and we all have the ability to, text correctly using correct diacritics in all 20 Alaska Native languages as well. And that was just another grassroots effort from a second language learner. One thing I'll also add is that I think it's very important, and we're seeing this, to celebrate strength where there is strength, wherever that might be and whatever that might look like. And I say that because, two of my closest language partners are also, non-native. They grew up in their communities. They're known by their Inupiaq names, and they're our very close partners and allies in this work. And I get to work with them. And a number of things I just mentioned, from the Facebook page to the apps, the Language Summit to the Digest, are because or in collaboration with those learners. So, yeah.
I was doing a film project with Keuchne Nora Dauenhauer and Kwayinak Richard Dauenhauer. And we knew Richard was pretty sick at the time. And so I was trying to get them to let's just talk about funny things. Let's talk about fun things. And he said, well, I remember, I think he was talking about Donna Walk, Austin Hammond, and he said, how come every time I ask you a question, you got to answer it with a story? And he says, well, let me tell you a story about that. So, I know we're getting wrapping up here. I'll answer this one with two quick narratives. The first one, is from, I heard from Clarence Jackson, who's from Cake. And he said, in this place called Latuya Bay, there was this giant tidal wave that had ripped all the trees off of this mountain, except for one tree on the top. And that tree began to scream, "Chatsai achke, chatsai achke. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And across the lake there, these patch of trees began to yell, "Isau tuwa'ach, Isau tuwa'ach." We hear you. We hear you. And just that act of being heard and acknowledged gave that tree the strength to start to regrow the forest on that mountainside. And I was in Hawaii, and it was my last semester there. And my friend Kiope, he says, "Kone, you want to go to the Aha Punana Leo graduation?" I said, "Well, of course I do. That sounds amazing." So we go, and we pulled up, and there was this big tent, and lots of people under the tent, and probably as many people as there are here, which is amazing. We have this many people gathered in one place for our Alaska Native languages. And there were this many people gathered together under this big tent. I thought, whoa, this is a big thing. And they had a band, and then the kids came out, and they're wearing their uniforms. So these are kids that are graduating from preschool, and they're probably going to go across the street to the language medium school, Navahi. And the basic structure is the kids would come up and give a speech in Hawaiian. And some of the kids would cry, and then their parents would also, one or two of their parents or guardians would also contribute to speech in Hawaiian. And I started thinking, I'm not afraid to cry. I like to, but I started thinking, I think I'm gonna cry today. And I was going through some losses in my family, so it was a really hard time for me personally. But I remember this thing was about to start, and I saw all these people lined up, probably 30 people, just all in a long line with their keiki, with their kids. And my friend Kiope, he comes up to me, and he's maybe old enough to be my dad. He's been involved with their language nest for a long time. And he walks up to me and he says, "Khone," and I remember I was standing up and I looked at him, and he's just got tears just welling up in his eyes, and I thought, oh no, I'm gonna just fall apart. And then he says, "Intergenerational transmission," and then he just leaves, just falling apart. And I thought, yeah, I feel you, brother. And then later, we watched, and these kids were to make these speeches, and they would put these lays of money and candy on them just to acknowledge what these kids are doing. A part of me thought, why don't we do that at home? Why don't we lift up the people who are doing this and really just let them know that they're really achieving something that's unbelievable? As they say, some of the guys on the Hokulea, dream the impossible dream. So later we're eating, And I went and I got the food, and I love to eat there because I never know all the time what I'm eating, but it's always yummy. I ate a little fish that looked like someone just dropped dory right into the hot oil. And Kyopi came up to me and he said, Rene, I'm really sorry I fell apart like that. He said, I've been doing this a long time. What I was trying to tell you is when I started teaching, I looked over there, I saw that long line of parents with their kids, and those are their babies, and those parents were my babies when I was starting. And that's where I got it. And I thought, that's where we're going. That's where we're going. So we have Alaska Native languages that have unbroken chains of communication, primarily Yupik and Siberian Yupik. We have the first generations of bilingual children in generations. Among the Tlingit people, we're seeing the first generations of kids who can grow up as understanders, and they're gonna become speakers. And it's probably been 60 years since that has happened. We have people speaking with conviction and without fear. They're speaking in their language to each other. They're speaking out in the community. They're getting encouragement to speak in the community. They're standing out against people. There's a senator from this neighborhood. I don't like to say his name because he doesn't deserve it. And he said, he argued against us when we were trying to make languages official languages of Alaska. And then he was arguing against a resolution urging the governor to declare a linguistic emergency. And they're saying, man, it's not an emergency. And in his testimony, he says, you know, I tried to debate with these people when they're trying to make them official languages, that it wasn't gonna work. And I feel kind of vindicated. And so I wanted to throw his words right back in his face and say, you got one speaker of an Alaska Native language remaining in your district. What on earth could you feel vindicated for? So we're building a world where there's more accountability for nonsense like that. And the biggest thing for me is we can see that this one elder, he'd say, maybe those old people used to be able to see way out into the future through our languages. And so I think we can see that future, and that future is indigenous. Cheesh.
So I want to, well, first of all, hi to each of you for joining in this first panel. You know, several of the speakers mentioned, even for those people who regularly go up onto a stage, it's nerve-wracking to come in front of this big of a crowd. And in concluding this panel and transitioning us towards lunch and really concluding this opening for the Language Institute, I wanted to, in conclusion of this, acknowledge and honor those of you who are elders, first language speakers, language instructors and teachers that are here in this room and have been a part of so much of the work that was spoken to and some of the sharing from those of us up here. When I was thinking about who was all gonna be in this room, I just thought in this space, there's so many people that we could just pull up and just listen to them all day long, maybe just one at a time, you know, and then we'd be here with 150 people for half the year. But there's that much knowledge in this room, and there's that much experience in the room. And so I just wanted to conclude this panel with the thinking of where are we at and where are we going with this. Thanks for each of you for being here with us during this summit. We're gonna be transitioning into lunch, and then you're gonna be going into your language groups. So you can begin to have this conversation and begin to do the work. In all, you'll see that in the agenda over these next 4 days, there's gonna be 9 sessions that are really just focused on doing the language work. And that's why there's only gonna be 1 plenary session from here on out for each of the next 3 days. So that the work, which is what we're really here to do, can be a focus. But I really wanna thank you because I did feel it was valuable for us to have just this general open conversation to launch off this week's convening. And with that, I know we have, I'm not sure if Selectina is here nearby, but if not, what we've arranged is to have lunch back here, and it's gonna be buffet style, but I know that we do have elders in the space. And so what I would like to do is for us to be able to begin if there's anybody that would like to serve any of the elders' plates first, and so we'll have a first wave of folks that want to come in to do some serving for some of the elders, maybe in your teams, because I think then there'll be most familiarity with the others that are part of your teams. And so once we've had the elders served, then we'll have any other elders that would like to serve, choose to serve themselves, with some like to do that still. They go through, and then the rest of us will make our way through with the lunch. So that's how we'll go. So thank you to the panelists. So I'd like to ask if there's if there's an elder who would like to share a quick blessing for the meal while the first servers are going through in your language. That would be appreciated.
Let's bless the food before we begin to eat. Please rise for the blessing. I'm going to speak and say the prayer in Inupiaq. Atanek, kochik sotin, ilignut kinyoligit chud, ulupak. Kuyanarep tigin inushakachtiluta, ikayutaronik allanun tau inusuktuanun. Uwan ikayok siut, ilisimaniptiun, ilitchit kabluta, nakuronik ikayutik saptignik inyunun. Asi tabu mga kinuaktiluta, ukwa nikinyaaktawut, nikinyaaktawut ulupak. Nadraki, kuchik sotin, beautignik. Asi tabu na iswamaksaluta, isumaksitiut, ikayutik sanginik inyupta ukalungitihun. Tabra. Amen.